Welcome to the deep dive. Just look around you right now. The smartphone probably in your hand, the coffee you might be drinking, the news scrolling past. How much of that stuff is truly local? How much of it carries fingerprints from all over the world? Our world today is just so profoundly interconnected. It influences, well, pretty much everything, doesn't it? From the food we eat to the info at our fingertips, often in ways we don't even really notice. And that whole intricate web, it brings us right to our central theme for this deep dive: globalization. It's a word you hear constantly, kind of like background noise in modern life. Sometimes it's hailed as this amazing catalyst for progress, lifting millions from poverty. But then you also hear it criticized as the source of strain, eroding cultures, widening divides. It's got so much weight. So what it really means, its impact. It can feel kind of elusive. Okay, so let's unpack this. It's complex. It's always changing.
Unpacking it is exactly what we need to do. We're drawing from a really rich source today, one that gives a pretty comprehensive look at globalization. It covers the undeniable economic pluses, the big cultural ripple effects, and also the inherent social and environmental challenges it throws up. Our goal here isn't just to skim the headlines. We want to distill the really crucial insights, help you move beyond that surface level to grasp the intricate mechanics and the far-reaching implications that really define how we live now. What's fascinating, I think, is how often we talk about globalization without really dissecting that dual nature, the good and the bad, sometimes all mixed together. So yeah, we want to give you, the listener, a really robust, nuanced understanding, help you see the forces at play, not as abstract ideas, but as tangible realities in your own life and the world.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Let's ground ourselves in that core definition from our source. Globalization is the process of increased interconnectedness among nations. Simple enough, maybe. But what does interconnectedness actually look like, tangibly? Beyond a textbook definition, what does it really mean for us right now?
That's a great place to start because, yeah, the definition sounds simple, but it hides incredible complexity. Modern interconnectedness is not just about, boxes moving across oceans. So obviously, that's a huge part of it. What makes today's globalization really different is the sheer speed, the scale, and the breadth of the flow. We're talking about this constant, rapid exchange of ideas, capital, technology, people, all crossing borders nonstop. I mean, think about your smartphone again. Designed maybe in California, made in Vietnam, chips from Taiwan, minerals from Congo, software coded in India. It's dizzying. Or your favorite streaming service, right? Instantly watching shows from Korea, Denmark, Brazil, and dinner tonight. Coffee from Colombia, spices from India, maybe flown in from South America. All thanks to these incredibly complex global logistics. These aren't just one-off things. They're threads in this incredibly dense, constantly tightening global tapestry.
Right, that's a crucial distinction because we've always had trade, haven't we? Empires connected distant places. The Silk Road, that was kind of ancient globalization. The Roman Empire had huge trade routes. So how is this modern interconnectedness really different? Is it just more of the same, or is something fundamentally new happening here?
Oh, it's absolutely a qualitative leap. It's not just more. While, yeah, empires connected regions, the Silk Road had amazing exchanges, those interactions were just so much slower, more localized, limited by the tech of the time. We're talking months, even years, for ideas or goods to cross continents back then. Today, information moves instantly. Financial markets shift trillions in milliseconds. Global supply chains are unbelievably vast, involving countless players everywhere. And the breadth is also totally different. It covers everything: scientific collaboration, social media trends, environmental problems, cybersecurity. Everything's linked. Local events can trigger immediate global ripples. So it's not just that more stuff is moving, it's how it's moving, how fast and how deeply integrated it's all become into daily life worldwide. This level of systemic interdependence, that's genuinely new.
Okay, so understanding that difference is key. Now let's get into the driving forces. Our sources really hammer home globalization's undeniable economic benefits, especially how it facilitates trade, investment, innovation. This seems to be the real engine behind so much of it.
Oh, absolutely. It's a powerful engine, no doubt. And the main way it works is by systematically dismantling trade barriers. Things like tariffs, quotas, those protectionist measures. When you reduce or remove those, nations suddenly get access to larger markets. And the really important thing here isn't just that companies sell more stuff. It's that this competition, this bigger market, directly boosts economic growth and consumer choice. For you listening, that means, well, usually a wider array of products available, often at better prices because of global efficiencies and specialized production. Just think about the sheer variety, in a supermarket or online now, stuff that would have been impossible or way too expensive before global trade.
And we've seen that play out really dramatically in some economies, haven't we? The source gives a pretty powerful example.
It really does. The specific case of developing nations like Vietnam is incredibly illustrative. They've gone through this massive transformation, right, from mostly farming economies to becoming major manufacturing hubs by strategically plugging themselves into these global supply chains. And as a result, it's been incredibly effective in lifting millions out of poverty through job creation. That's a huge tangible impact of globalization right there.
Yeah, lifting millions out of poverty. You really can't overstate that. But let's unpack that process a bit more. What does the transformation actually involve for a country like Vietnam? How do you go from, say, mostly rural farming to a global manufacturing player? And what are the sort of deeper implications of that kind of rapid change?
Right, it's a really multi-layered thing. First off, it usually starts with a big influx of what's called foreign direct investment, or FDI. So multinational companies, always looking for efficiency in new markets, they invest heavily. They build factories, bring in machinery, help develop crucial infrastructure. This creates a whole new industrial base, pretty much from scratch sometimes. Second, these countries get deeply embedded in these highly specialized global supply chains. So instead of trying to make everything, they specialize. Maybe assembling electronics for a global brand or making textiles for fashion labels. This specialization, it allows for incredible efficiency and scale. And the deeper implication, well, it's not just about the number of jobs, though that's obviously vital. It's about fundamentally changing the economic power, the agency of these nations. Now, sure, rapid industrialization brings its own set of challenges. You've got to think about fair labor, managing cities growing super fast, environmental impacts. We'll get into those later. But the sheer number of jobs created, from the factory floor right up to logistics management, it provides stable income. And that improves lives, pays for education, healthcare, creates opportunities that just didn't exist before for millions. It lets countries shift away from relying on, say, selling raw materials with volatile prices towards more stable industrial output. It changes their place in the whole global economic picture.
And thinking about the wider ripples, how does a country like Vietnam integrating so deeply into global manufacturing affect other economies? Regionally, globally, it sounds like a big rebalancing act.
It's exactly that, a dynamic, sometimes messy rebalancing. Regionally, you can see both intense competition in nearby countries trying to attract similar investments, but also cooperation, maybe finding complementary roles in the same supply chains. Globally, well, consumers like us benefit from cheaper, often pretty high-quality goods. But the really profound insight here is that it forces established industrial nations to kind of redefine themselves economically. They have to innovate faster, move up the value chain, focus on higher skills, tech, services to stay competitive. This constant pressure forces evolution, creating new opportunities in advanced economies, but also real insecurity for traditional workers everywhere. It demands constant adaptation, retraining. It's like this relentless evolutionary pressure cooker for national economies.
That really drives home the constant change that's just built into globalization. And here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just about making things cheaper, right? It's also about pushing innovation itself. Our source mentions how multinational corporations actively drive innovation by investing in research and development, and that benefits both established and emerging economies. They're not just factories, they're becoming knowledge centers too.
That's such a crucial point and often missed. Multinationals globalize their R&D for really smart strategic reasons, not just to cut costs. They can tap into incredibly diverse talent pools globally. Access specialized scientific expertise, maybe materials science in Germany, biotech in Singapore, AI development somewhere else entirely. They also want to be close to new and growing markets. That lets them tailor products directly to local needs, which leads to more successful innovations. Plus, different regions might offer unique resources, maybe specific regulatory environments for testing, or even cultural insights that are gold for product development. Imagine like a big tech company setting up an AI lab in Africa to tackle local infrastructure problems, or a pharma company running trials in diverse populations for better drug efficacy. This mixing of ideas, resources, perspectives, it just fundamentally speeds up innovation for everyone involved. It pushes the boundaries faster than if R&D stayed locked up in one place.
So globalization isn't just stuff and money moving around. It's also this accelerator for the spread of technology. It's democratizing access to tools that can genuinely change lives.
Precisely. And the source gives a fantastic example. Mobile banking in Africa. This isn't just, a handy app. It's a huge leap that genuinely enhances financial inclusion and empowers marginalized communities in ways old school banking just couldn't. I mean, in many parts of Africa, traditional banking, physical branches, ATMs, loads of paperwork, it's either scarce, expensive, or just totally absent, especially out in rural areas. Mobile banking, often using just basic phones and local agents, it completely skips over those hurdles.
That sounds truly transformative, like building a whole new financial system where there wasn't much before.
It really is. Picture a small farmer in a remote village. With mobile banking, suddenly they can get paid for their crops right on their phone. They can save money digitally, safely, maybe even get a microloan for seeds or equipment, all without needing to travel hours to a town or deal with a formal bank. Or think about families in cities sending money easily and safely to relatives far away. Cuts costs, risks, make sure the money gets there. This change. It supports countless small businesses, helps critical money flow within communities, and gives access to credit to so many people who were totally shut out before. The key insight here is that globalization's tech spread can actually boost local power and resilience. It provides tools that bypass old barriers and put financial control directly in people's hands.
And beyond just finance, are there other technologies you see spreading globally like this because of interconnectedness that are changing lives in maybe unexpected ways?
Oh, the list just keeps growing. It's actually quite amazing. Telemedicine is a big one. Remote consultations with specialists across borders. That brings top-level medical advice to places where doctors are few and far between. Online education platforms, too. They're making learning accessible on a scale we've never seen. You can take courses, even get degrees from top universities anywhere in the world just with an internet connection. That opens doors regardless of location or background. Even things like sustainable energy tech, solar panels, microgrids, they're spreading fast, bringing power to off-grid communities. That doesn't just improve living standards. It helps local economies grow without relying on, big, often fossil fuel-based grids. These examples really show that globalization isn't just about money. It's about spreading powerful tools that meet basic human needs and seriously improve quality of life, often bridging those old divides.
So if someone wants to really grasp technological progress globally, what this means is that innovation isn't just stuck in a few specific places anymore or in the fancy labs of rich countries. It's becoming more like a shared global resource. It gets spread around, adapted quickly. The impact feels like it could be exponential, leading to faster, maybe more inclusive progress everywhere.
Exactly. The benefits spread more widely. It fosters a world that's more technologically capable, more connected, where a solution found in one place can quickly help meet needs somewhere else entirely.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. Our sources also really emphasize cultural exchange as a major advantage, promoting mutual understanding and tolerance. This feels like a natural, hopeful outcome when people, ideas, and goods move more freely.
It absolutely is. And one of the most direct, really powerful examples the source gives is the experience of international students studying abroad. These students, they're not just getting degrees, right? They're immersing themselves completely in new societies, learning customs, maybe new languages, dealing with different traditions firsthand. The really powerful insight here is that they often return with broader perspectives, contributing to global cooperation. This isn't just a nice idea, it's a proven way to build empathy. Get that nuanced view of the world you need to navigate today's complexities. They become like cultural bridges.
And it's not just formal education, is it? What about other ways, maybe more informal ways, that just being exposed to different traditions leads to more understanding between cultures?
Yeah, absolutely. Beyond school, just travel itself is a huge teacher. It forces you out of your bubble, makes you encounter different ways of thinking and living directly. Then there's the massive influence of global media. Think about K-dramas blowing up worldwide, or Bollywood films, or Latin music topping charts everywhere. When you watch or listen, you're not just entertained. You're getting little windows into other cultures, their stories, their humor, their social issues, their values. This kind of exposure is really key for breaking down stereotypes. It builds empathy because you start seeing the world from different points of view. And it helps you genuinely appreciate that there are many valid ways to live. It makes the other feel less strange, more human. And that's fundamental for a more cooperative world.
That's a really powerful idea. And thinking about those informal platforms like streaming services, social media, maybe big international music festivals, how do they fit in? How do they contribute to this cultural exchange, maybe in ways that are less structured, but just as potent as, say, studying abroad?
Oh, these informal platforms are incredibly powerful. They're like these organic engines driving cultural mixing and understanding. A streaming service, for instance, it just drops you into stories, humor, issues from countries you might never physically visit. It creates this kind of shared global conversation starter. Think about something like Squid Game, right? It wasn't just a TV show. It sparked global discussion about capitalism, debt, human nature, all through this unique Korean lens. Social media. That allows direct person-to-person cultural sharing. Trends, memes, personal stories, they cross borders instantly, often building solidarity between diverse groups who find common ground. International music festivals. They bring artists and fans together from everywhere, celebrating diverse music, creating this sense of shared humanity that goes beyond language. The key insight, I think, is that these platforms often create a kind of global youth culture that can transcend national identity. They build common ground for connection in ways formal education might struggle with, speeding up cultural integration and appreciation. And it's not just culture. Globalization also massively accelerates access to knowledge and resources. This is absolutely fundamental if we want to tackle some of the world's biggest collective problems.
It's incredible how fast information moves now. Our sources talk about how online platforms, international collaborations, they enable this rapid dissemination of information, from scientific discoveries to educational resources. It really feels like knowledge is being democratized on a huge scale.
It really is, yeah. And this super fast sharing, it's been particularly obvious and absolutely critical in how the world tries to respond to really complex global challenges. Climate change is the big one, but also things like pandemics, the quick sharing of scientific data, the latest research, new technologies across borders. It's not just helpful, it's basically essential for any kind of coordinated, effective response. Without that globalized way of sharing knowledge, getting everyone on the same page and acting together would be way, way harder, maybe impossible.
And the source points to a very concrete example of this kind of collective action.
Right, the Paris Accord on climate change. That's a prime example of countries trying to agree on collective action. It's this huge international agreement, signed by almost everyone. But something like that doesn't just happen out of thin air. It relies entirely on a shared scientific understanding of the problem a global consensus built, because data and research were shared openly. The Accord itself involves really complex global negotiations, this collective commitment, even if it's sometimes shaky to cut emissions. The fact that knowledge, projections, best practices can be shared quickly and transparently, that helps immensely in reaching that consensus and then trying to coordinate action. It highlights just how vital shared data, scientific teamwork, and collective political will really are.
So, what does all this mean for our collective future? It suggests there's this huge potential, right? A potential for a world where we can actually tackle shared goals together. Things like sustainable development, dealing with existential threats for the benefit of humanity as a whole. It offers a bit of hope, maybe, that global problems could actually meet global solutions. Okay, so we've looked at the huge upsides, the economic energy, the tech leaps, the potential for cultural understanding. But like we said at the start, globalization has this other side, this dual nature. It brings significant challenges. Our sources point out that even with the benefits of cultural exchange, there are significant challenges, particularly in terms of cultural and social impacts. And often this leads to something called cultural homogenization.
Yeah, this is a really critical shadow side. It often gets pushed aside when everyone's focused on economic growth. Because while, yes, vibrant cultural exchange can be enriching, if it's unchecked or really unbalanced, globalization can unfortunately lead towards this kind of uniform global culture. It risks diminishing what makes local places unique. The source talks about how the spread of global brands and media can result in local traditions and languages being overshadowed by dominant Western influences. It's this powerful, almost quiet force, like a tide washing over unique local ways of life. Not usually malicious, but the consequences can be profound.
And the source gives some examples that are pretty vivid, actually quite concerning.
It does. Think about the proliferation of fast food chains in Asia, which has diminished traditional culinary practices. Now, this isn't just about what people eat. It's about generations of food knowledge, unique regional ingredients, the whole social ritual around cooking and eating together, all slowly getting replaced by standardized, globally marketed meals. Or the other example, just as alarming, the dominance of English threatens indigenous languages. And languages, they're so much more than just ways to talk. They hold entire worldviews, histories, unique knowledge about ecosystems, different ways of understanding life. When a language disappears, an entire way of knowing the world is just gone. Irrevocably.
That's really profound when you put it like that. How does this homogenization actually happen, though? Is it like someone's deliberately imposing it, or is it more subtle, more organic? And what's the real cost when, say, a unique food tradition or an indigenous language just fades away?
It's rarely like a deliberate, malicious plan, which is maybe what makes it so effective, so insidious. It's more often this powerful sort of organic shift. It's driven by market forces, by how saturated we are with global media, and just by changing consumer tastes, especially among younger people. Global brands, they have massive marketing budgets, huge economies of scale that local businesses just can't compete with. Global media, often coming from a few dominant cultural centers, is everywhere. It's appealing. And consumers, well, we look for convenience, affordability, or maybe we're drawn to the modern lifestyle associated with global brands. So people naturally drift towards them. The cost, the irreversible cost, is huge. When a food tradition fades, it's not just recipes gone. It's the farming knowledge, the unique ways of growing things, the biodiversity of local ingredients, the social rituals around food that bind communities. All that gets lost. When indigenous language vanishes, we lose unique stories, complex histories passed down orally, traditional ecological knowledge about specific places, a whole framework for understanding the world differently. Every language is like a unique lens on reality. Losing one just diminishes our collective human heritage, narrows our understanding of human potential. The real insight: cultural diversity is probably just as vital for human resilience as biodiversity is for ecosystems.
Okay, here's where it gets really troubling, I think. What are the deeper impacts psychologically, societally, when this erosion of cultural identity happens? How does it affect people's sense of self, their sense of belonging?
The impacts can be really unsettling, yeah, and deeply corrosive. This erosion can seriously weaken social cohesion. It can leave people feeling disconnected, like they've lost their roots, their sense of belonging. When people feel like their heritage, their ancestors' way of life, is being undervalued or just disappearing, it can lead to rootlessness, alienation, even resentment towards whatever forces they see causing this loss. This feeling of displacement can cause identity crises for individuals. It can make it much harder for communities to unite around common goals or maintain a distinct identity in a world changing so fast. And sometimes that void gets filled by new identities, maybe less inclusive ones, even reactionary ones. That can lead to social friction or even a backlash against globalization itself. That just highlights that really delicate balance between embracing the global and protecting precious local heritage. And moving to another major challenge, our sources are very clear. Globalization exacerbates economic inequality, both within and between nations. This is a huge ongoing point of criticism.
Yeah, and you see that starkly when you look at the inequality between nations. Some countries integrate successfully, become these manufacturing hubs we talked about, but others, the source mentions, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, struggle to compete in global markets, leading to widened income gaps. It's definitely not a rising tide lifting all boats equally.
Exactly right. And the reasons why some struggle are complex, often really deep-rooted. Many nations are hampered by historical disadvantages. Maybe colonial legacies left them with economies built just to export raw materials, not diversified production. Often their institutions are weak. Crucially, many just lack the basic modern infrastructure: reliable power, good transport networks, widespread internet access. Without those fundamentals, they just can't effectively compete in today's complex global supply chains. Plus, they often find it incredibly hard to compete against hyper-efficient global industries, or, say, heavily subsidized farming in wealthier nations. It makes it almost impossible for their own new industries to get off the ground. The tough insight here is that globalization, if it's just left to run wild, often reinforces existing power imbalances. It creates this cycle where some nations stay stuck as resource exporters, dependent on fluctuating global demand, instead of developing resilient, diversified, maybe knowledge-based economies.
And if we think about the long-term consequences, geopolitically, humanitarian consequences, of these gaps between nations just persisting, maybe even widening, what kind of future does that suggest?
It suggests a pretty worrying future, honestly. Geopolitically, these wide gaps can breed real instability, resentment, this deep sense of injustice that can fuel conflicts, mass migration, the rise of extremism. It also maintains huge power imbalances that make international cooperation on other vital issues, climate change, pandemics, security, much, much harder. Trust erodes, shared interests seem weaker. From a humanitarian view, these gaps mean entrenched poverty, terrible access to education and healthcare, cycles of deprivation that force millions to seek opportunities elsewhere, often in really dangerous ways. It's a fundamental threat to global peace, security, and fairness. It challenges the whole idea of a shared human future, really.
And it's not just between nations. The impact is felt deeply within societies, too. Our source points out that within societies, low-skilled workers often face job displacement due to outsourcing or automation, contributing to social unrest. This hits very close to home for a lot of communities around the world.
It really does, yeah, profoundly. The ways jobs disappear are complex and pretty relentless. Outsourcing is when companies move production or services somewhere cheaper, which directly gets jobs at home, in manufacturing, call centers, even some service roles. At the same time, you've got automation advancing constantly, especially in manufacturing, logistics, data stuff, machines and algorithms replacing human workers. Both these trends hit low-skilled workers hardest. They often lack the specific training, the digital skills, or just the opportunities to switch to new, higher-skilled jobs. And when that economic insecurity spreads, when a big chunk of the population feels genuinely left behind by this global economy, it puts immense strain on the social fabric. That often bubbles up as social unrest. You see protests, strikes, definitely an increase in political polarization. It creates fertile ground for populist movements that often effectively blame globalization for these problems at home. The key insight: economic hardship and feeling disenfranchised very often translate directly into deep social tensions, a loss of faith in institutions, and demands for radical change, sometimes leading to really surprising political shifts.
So, what does this all mean for the fabric of our societies? It sounds like huge pressure on things like social safety nets and a critical, urgent need for new ways to help workers learn new skills, adapt to these new kinds of jobs.
Absolutely. You need robust, easy-to-access retraining programs, lifelong learning opportunities, strong social support systems, unemployment benefits, help finding new jobs. These become absolutely essential, not just to stop widespread hardship, but also to make sure that the benefits of globalization, whatever they are actually shared more fairly within society. That fosters resilience, not resentment. And beyond just inequality, there's another major criticism: that globalization prioritizes profit over social welfare, that multinational corporations exploit lax labor regulations in poorer countries, leading to poor working conditions and low wages. This is a really troubling, ethically charged part of the global economy.
Can you explain that a bit more? What exactly are lax labor regulations, and what's this race to the bottom phenomenon? It sounds pretty systemic.
It is systemic, unfortunately, and it has huge human costs. Lax labor regulations basically means laws about minimum wage, working hours, safety standards, the right to form unions. These laws are either weak, outdated, or just not properly enforced. The race to the bottom is this competitive dynamic. Countries wanting to attract foreign investment and jobs might deliberately lower their labor and environmental standards or just turn a blind eye to enforcing them. Then multinational companies, always under pressure to cut costs and compete globally, actively look for these places with the weakest rules and lowest wages. It creates this downward spiral. Countries feel they have to keep standards low to stay attractive, which just perpetuates poor conditions and keeps wages down. And when we talk about poor working conditions, we're not just talking about inconvenience. It can mean really serious stuff. Incredibly long hours, often without proper overtime pay, unsafe environments with hazardous materials or dangerous machinery. Shockingly, sometimes child labor still exists in supply chains. And often, no basic benefits like health insurance or paid leave, and no right for workers to organize collectively to improve things. These conditions undermine basic human dignity, trap people in poverty, and exploit the most vulnerable workers in the global system.
Wow. That really raises a huge question about ethical responsibility, not just for corporations, but for us as consumers too, right, in this globally connected economy. Where does the accountability actually lie, and how can it even be enforced?
It's a massively complex ethical puzzle, no easy answers. Corporations clearly have a moral duty to ensure ethical practices regardless of local laws. But the relentless pressure of global competition, shareholder demands, that makes it tough. Consumers, well, by always demanding cheaper goods, faster delivery, we kind of inadvertently fuel that pressure. Yet we often have no real transparency into how things are made deep down in those complex supply chains. So it points to this shared responsibility. It stretches way beyond national borders. You need a combination of things: strong international cooperation to set and enforce global labor standards, powerful corporate social responsibility efforts, maybe driven by investors and brand reputation, and increasingly, informed consumers making choices that prioritize ethical sourcing. Accountability is spread out, making it a collective global challenge.
And finally, a major drawback that comes up again and again in our sources: the environmental toll of globalization. This might be one of the most widely recognized and frankly worrying negative impacts.
It is, and for very good reason. The core issue is stark. The expansion of global trade increases carbon emissions through transportation and industrial activity, contributing significantly to climate change. Every single product you see, every part inside it, has a carbon footprint from every step of its journey. And right now, a huge chunk of that energy still comes from burning fossil fuels.
Can you break that down a bit? What are the specific ways these global supply chains rack up greenhouse gas emissions? It feels like it's coming from multiple places.
You're absolutely right. It's a cumulative impact hitting from several angles. First, international shipping, massive cargo ships burning heavy fuel oil accounts for a big slice of global emissions. Then there's air freight, faster, but even more carbon intensive, used for electronics, fresh food, that sort of thing. Then you've got road and rail transport, essential for moving goods to and from ports, from huge warehouses out to consumers. And beyond just moving stuff, think about the massive increase in industrial activity needed to make all these goods for a worldwide market close, electronics, packaged food. That consumes enormous amounts of energy, often from coal, oil, or gas, and releases industrial pollutants too. It's this pervasive systemic contribution to emissions at almost every stage of a product's life, from getting raw materials to disposing of it.
And how do our demands as consumers, like wanting things delivered tomorrow, the constant churn of fast fashion, wanting exotic foods from halfway across the world, how does that make the environmental footprint even worse? Our choices seem directly linked.
Oh, consumer demand plays a huge, often underestimated role here. That expectation of next day, even same-day delivery, that relies heavily on fast, often less efficient air freight. Fast fashion encourages buying cheap clothes frequently, treating them as disposable. That drives a relentless cycle of production, transport, and then throwing away garments, many ending up in landfills. Similarly, wanting globally sourced exotic products, out-of-season fruit, specialized ingredients that requires long-distance, carbon-heavy transport, and often intensive, environmentally damaging farming practices far away. These demands we make directly fuel the very activities that pump out emissions, strain resources, and worsen the environmental toll. The deep connection here is between the global economy and our individual consumption patterns. They're completely intertwined in this environmental problem, and that ties straight into the second major environmental issue: resource degradation. Our sources highlight how developing nations, often reliant on resource extraction to fuel global demand, face environmental degradation, such as deforestation in the Amazon.
That paints a very direct, very alarming picture. What is that explicit link between global demand for stuff and the pressure on these fragile ecosystems? And what are the long-term, maybe permanent consequences of something like deforestation in the Amazon?
The link is tragically direct, yeah. Global demand for commodities, things like huge amounts of soy for animal feed or palm oil for processed foods and biofuels, leads directly to vast areas of precious biodiverse forest being cleared, often illegally, just for massive monoculture plantations. Same goes for the relentless demand for timber, minerals, other raw materials. It drives intensive logging and mining in developing countries. These nations, often needing foreign currency, facing economic pressures, feel compelled to exploit their natural resources, some way too fast, unsustainably, just to meet the seemingly endless demand from global markets. The long-term consequences of, say, Amazon deforestation, they're catastrophic, and they reach far beyond Brazil. The Amazon is this massive carbon sink. It regulates global weather patterns. Destroying it releases enormous amounts of stored carbon, speeding up climate change. It causes irreversible loss of biodiversity, countless unique species gone forever, weakening the planet's resilience. And it directly threatens the lives, cultures, the very existence of indigenous communities who depend on that forest. A really crucial insight. What looks like a local environmental problem in one country is actually a direct result of global consumption patterns. And it has global consequences that affect every single one of us, often permanently.
If you connect all those dots, it becomes painfully clear that chasing economic benefits, especially through unmanaged globalization, often carries this huge, sometimes irreversible environmental price tag. It's a heavy debt that future generations are definitely going to have to pay, demanding we seriously rethink our global priorities, like now.
Okay, so we've laid out the compelling pluses and the pretty sobering, sometimes devastating, minuses of globalization. Where our sources ultimately land is on a nuanced, but actually hopeful conclusion. Globalization's advantages outweigh its drawbacks, but only if managed effectively. That's the key phrase. It moves us beyond just saying globalization good or globalization bad. It puts a focus on agency, on intentional design. So what does managed effectively really mean here? Fundamentally, it means we have to deliberately design and rigorously implement mechanisms to protect vulnerable populations and cultures while also safeguarding the environment. The goal isn't to stop globalization that's probably impossible and maybe not even desirable given the benefits. The goal is to shape it, to steer its course intentionally, proactively. instead of just letting raw market forces dictate everything, which, as we've seen, can lead to really damaging outcomes.
Right. So what does that imply for how we collectively approach this incredibly powerful force? It sounds like it demands really intentional policy, genuine international collaboration, and a deep shared sense of responsibility. It's not something that just happens to us. It's something we absolutely have to guide.
Exactly. And the sources don't just leave it there. They actually map out some clear, interconnected pillars for how we might achieve a more equitable, sustainable, inclusive globalization. Let's start with economic fairness and protection, the core recommendation. Governments and international organizations should implement policies to ensure fair trade practices. This hits directly at those economic imbalances we talked about. And a specific example they give is using things such as tariffs that support local industries in developing nations. Okay, so how can tariffs actually work protectively? Well, imagine a brand new industry starting up in a developing country, maybe textiles, maybe solar panels, maybe local food processing. Without some protection, it'd probably get crushed immediately by huge, efficient global competitors who can make things way cheaper due to scale or tech advantages. Tariffs, basically strategic taxes on imports, make those foreign goods more expensive temporarily. This gives the local industry crucial breathing room. Time to grow, build infrastructure, train workers, become more competitive before it has to face the full blast of global competition. The insight here isn't about permanent protectionism, necessarily. It's about using strategic, maybe temporary, protection as a tool for development, helping countries eventually participate more fairly in the global economy. It's about trying to level the playing field, not just shut down the game. And beyond just tariffs, the sources really stress that labor protections and fair wage policies can prevent exploitation, ensuring that globalization benefits workers as well as corporations. This goes right at that race to the bottom problem, aiming to lift working standards globally.
That seems absolutely crucial. But what are the real-world challenges? How do you actually enforce protections like that across different countries with all their different laws and priorities? And what role can bodies like international labor groups or consumer advocates or even companies themselves realistically play in making fair labor happen?
Yeah, the challenges are huge. You got different national laws, different abilities or willingness to enforce them, but there are powerful levers we can pull. International bodies, like the International Labor Organization, ILO, they set global standards, offer technical help, monitor compliance. That gives countries a benchmark and some accountability. Consumer advocacy groups, they can exert massive pressure by exposing unethical practices, hitting brands where it hurts their reputation and sales, demanding transparency. Corporate social responsibility efforts where companies voluntarily commit to ethical sourcing and fair labor can also be really powerful, especially if investors and consumers push them. The key takeaway: achieving fair labor globally needs this multi-pronged attack. Governments, international groups, active civil society, and increasingly ethically aware companies and consumers. It's a shared job that needs constant attention.
Okay, shifting to culture. The recommendation is cultural preservation initiatives, like UNESCO's heritage programs, can safeguard traditions while promoting global exchange. This sounds like exactly the kind of intentional balancing act needed against those homogenizing forces we discussed. How do programs like UNESCO's actually work on the ground? What kinds of things are they protecting? And crucially, how do they manage to promote global exchange at the same time instead of just like isolating cultures?
Right, UNESCO's programs are really smart and multifaceted, designed for exactly that dual purpose. They protect tangible heritage, iconic physical sites like the pyramids, the Great Wall, ancient ruins, making sure they're preserved. But just as importantly, they also recognize, protect, and promote intangible cultural stuff, traditional music, ancient dances, craft techniques, oral storytelling, indigenous rituals, things you can't just put in a museum. How? Through various ways: giving money and expertise for conservation, funding local artists and culture bearers, supporting efforts to keep endangered languages alive, designating things as intangible cultural heritage, which brings global recognition and often resources. The really clever insight is, by bringing global attention and resources to these unique cultural assets, they don't just shield them from homogenization. They actively promote global exchange by making these diverse traditions accessible, understandable, deeply appreciated by people worldwide. It fosters cross-cultural understanding and respect. It shows that global interaction can celebrate local distinctiveness, not erase it.
Yeah, that's where it feels really innovative and hopeful. It's about finding ways to actively celebrate and maintain diversity within this interconnected world, not trying to stop global influence, but making sure those unique local flavors, those different ways of being human, don't just vanish.
Exactly. It's about empowering local cultures not just to survive, but to thrive, adapt, maybe even influence the global conversation instead of just being passively absorbed, making it a two-way cultural street.
And critically, our sources stress that education plays a crucial role in preparing individuals for a globalized world, equipping them with skills to compete while fostering appreciation for cultural diversity. This really feels like the foundation for everything else, doesn't it? What kinds of skills are becoming absolutely essential in today's global job market? And how can education really cultivate a deep appreciation for different cultures, going beyond just, tolerating them?
In today's job market, adaptability, agility, resilience, absolutely key because things change so fast. Cross-cultural communication skills, being able to understand, empathize, work effectively with people from different backgrounds, it's not a bonus anymore. It's essential for almost everyone. Critical thinking, complex problem solving, creativity, you need those to tackle new global challenges. And strong digital literacy is just the baseline now. Beyond skills, education can build appreciation by intentionally weaving diverse perspectives and world histories into what's taught. Promoting immersive language learning, encouraging international exchanges for students and teachers, using project-based learning that involves real global collaboration. The profound insight here is moving beyond just tolerating difference to actively valuing, celebrating, and leveraging the richness that diversity brings. It's about fostering a truly global mindset that sees diversity as a strength, not a problem. Now, on the critical environmental front, the message from our sources is urgent. Environmental regulations must be strengthened to mitigate the ecological impact of global trade, with incentives for sustainable practices. This directly tackles those rising emissions and resource depletion problems. So, concrete examples of stronger rules. Much stricter emission standards for ships and planes, requiring cleaner fuels, better engine tech, widespread carbon pricing, carbon taxes, or cap-and-trade systems making pollution cost more, pushing companies to cut back. Also, mandatory sustainable sourcing rules for things like timber, palm oil, minerals, ensuring supply chains aren't driving deforestation or destructive mining. And incentives. Governments and international groups can offer big subsidies for businesses investing in green tech and renewables, give tax breaks to eco-friendly companies, pour investment into sustainable infrastructure globally. The key idea: these measures don't just limit harm, they shift the whole economic calculation, making destructive practices less appealing and sustainable ones more profitable. And connecting this back to the big picture, it's fundamentally about making sure our planet can actually sustain the level of global activity we have now and in the future. Without a healthy planet, all other progress, economic, social, cultural, is built on sand. It's the ultimate foundation.
And finally, tackling that deep-seated inequality requires specific, targeted action. Our sources recommend investing in education and infrastructure in marginalized regions to enhance their global competitiveness. This feels like a very direct, practical answer to those widening gaps. Can you explain the fundamental role of that kind of investment in education and infrastructure and really empowering regions to participate fairly, to move beyond just being dependent?
Absolutely. Sustained, robust investment in education is foundational. It breaks poverty cycles, builds competitiveness. That means quality schooling from primary level up, good vocational training for practical skills, access to higher education, widespread digital literacy. Without an educated, adaptable workforce, regions get stuck in low-wage jobs. They can't innovate. At the same time, critical infrastructure is vital. Reliable transport, good roads, rail, ports, logistics to get goods to market attract investment. Widespread, affordable internet access to connect to global info, e-commerce, remote work. Clean, reliable energy to power development without wrecking the environment. The crucial insight is these aren't just one-off aid projects. They're long-term investments that create the conditions for marginalized regions to build diverse, resilient economies, attract sustainable investment, and join the global system on fairer, more self-determined terms.
What really stands out from all this is the holistic approach needed. It's crystal clear there's no single magic bullet. It's got to be this coordinated suite of interconnected solutions, pulling all these different levers at the same time.
That's exactly the essence of managing it effectively, thoughtfully. And it brings us back to that overarching vision. By intentionally fostering inclusive globalization, societies can genuinely harness its immense potential while robustly preserving cultural and social integrity. This isn't just wishful thinking. It feels like a strategic necessity for our future. So, just to synthesize, all these pillars: economic fairness through fair trade and labor rules, cultural preservation via heritage programs, and empowering education, environmental protection with strong regulations and incentives, targeted investment in education and infrastructure, they all work together. They aim to create a type of globalization that truly benefits everyone, not just a select few. It's about consciously shaping a world that's more just, more sustainable, more respectful, where diversity is celebrated, opportunity is shared more fairly, and human dignity is upheld everywhere. Which raises, I think, a really important, maybe the defining question for us all. Can humanity actually balance this relentless drive for economic growth with our deep-seated cultural values and the very real, non-negotiable limits of our planet? It's a challenge that's going to define this century, no doubt about it. Hashtag, tag, outro.
Wow, what an incredibly deep dive that was. We've gone all the way from defining globalization as this process of increased interconnectedness, exploring its huge benefits, economic growth, tech advances, cultural exchange, and then really digging into the significant, often quite troubling challenges too. The erosion of culture, worsening inequality, serious environmental damage. And our sources brought us to this very nuanced, but ultimately, I think, hopeful conclusion. Globalization's benefits can outweigh the drawbacks, and it's a big, but only through a balanced, thoughtful, and proactive approach. So what does this all mean for you? It means seeing globalization not as some uncontrollable force, but as this powerful, transformative thing that absolutely demands conscious guidance, intentional policies, and proactive management from all of us.
Exactly. It comes down to intentionality, to agency. A thoughtfully managed globalization really does have the potential to lead to a world that's genuinely interconnected, prosperous, and culturally vibrant. But getting there, it requires everyone playing an active, ongoing role. Strong policies nationally and internationally, real international cooperation, powerful voices from civil society, and, crucially, informed awareness and action from individuals. We each have a part to play in understanding this, advocating for better approaches, and contributing to a fair, more sustainable global system.
And maybe here's something for you to think about long after you finish listening today.
Yeah, if globalization is basically this ongoing expansion of human interaction across all borders, economic, cultural, social, environmental, what specific personal responsibilities do we carry as global citizens to make sure that interaction is consistently fair, truly sustainable for our planet, and genuinely respectful of all the world's diverse cultures? Beyond the big policies and international deals we talked about, what everyday choices can you make in what you buy, how you engage with global media, even how you learn about and interact with other cultures? How can those choices contribute, even in small ways, to a more inclusive, harmonious, and truly beneficial globalized world? Because your choices, they do ripple outwards. They help shape our collective future.